which leads us to the Cossacks. So the Cossacks are free people who managed to escape this system. They escape the system in which either you are a noble or a serf. Right? That's the Polish system. They escape that system by going into the steppe, right? Into the steppe, into what's now the southeast of Ukraine. They have their headquarters in what they call the Sich, in the middle of the Dnipro River. They farm, they fish, and they raid. They raid the Crimean Khanate, which we're going to talk about. Sometimes they even try to raid Istanbul. They are and they survive by being out of reach. They are at the fringes, though, of the Polish system, and they understand the Polish system, and many of them are educated by, some of them anyway, like Bohdan Khmelnytsky. They're educated by Jesuits, right? They know the Polish system, and they have the idea of rights. Very important idea. They have the idea of rights. They have the idea that if we were nobles, we would have rights, right? And the Cossacks want to be in the Polish system, but they're not allowed into the Polish system because the existing Polish nobility won't let them into the Polish system. So there's a compromise which is struck, which is called being a registered Cossack. So there was a list of a few thousand Cossacks who had some kind of status in the Polish state, and then the rest of them were called unregistered Cossacks, and they had no kind of status in the Polish state. Every time Poland wanted to fight a war, the Cossacks suddenly became very important. And this, by the way, was the period when the Poles were extraordinarily successful on the battlefield. The late 16th century, early 17th century, when they were defeating the Ottomans and they were defeating the Russians. In the early 17th century, circa 1620, Poland is bigger than it ever will be before or again. And that's when the Cossacks are essentially serving as infantry, and the Polish nobility is serving as cavalry, and they fight extraordinarily well together. It's not a combination you would wish to face on the battlefield. But in 1648, this all breaks up, and you've heard some about this already. The underlying reasons are what I talked about: the social, religious, and linguistic differences. The precipitating reason has to do with the Cossacks themselves and whether or not Cossacks are part of the Polish state or not. In particular, this guy, whose name I probably forget to write down, Khmelnytsky. Bohdan. He has a claim which has to do with his wife and property, and he's unable to get his claim through the Polish courts, and at least in legend, the king laughs at him, and he naturally thinks, if I were a Polish noble, I would have access to the Polish courts. And he doesn't, and so he does what you do when you don't have access to the law, which is that he rebels. But he rebels at a time, this is the 1640s, at a time when the Cossacks were all gathered anyway on the field for what was going to be a war against the Ottoman Empire. And instead of fighting against the Ottoman Empire, Khmelnytsky rouses them to fight against the Poles. This happens at a time when the Polish king dies, which means that there's a while when the Cossacks have a great deal of success on the battlefield. Fighting whom? This is important. Fighting generally the Polish-speaking Roman Catholic Ukrainian nobility. Right? This is not how it is in the Ukrainian textbooks, but this is largely a Ukrainian civil war, at least at the beginning. It's the Cossacks against the the Polonized Roman Catholic, Polish-speaking local Ukrainian nobility, until the Polish army eventually shows up and turns the tide. When the Polish army shows up and turns the tide, we have a very fateful moment. And the very fateful moment is that the Cossacks have to seek an ally. Up until about that time, their ally had been the Crimean Tatars, the Crimean Khanate. It's as of 1654, the Crimean Khanate has withdrawn. The Cossacks are losing to the Polish state, and so they need an ally. And for an ally, they find this fairly exotic and unknown to them state, which we've talked about a little bit, and we'll talk about more in the next lecture, which is Muscovy. And after that, everything changes.